45 years ago, the world was a different place. Yet, today we sit with the harshly visible warts and all in our society that are beginning to fester. What have we really achieved in the last 2 or 3 decades?
Well, look, we have achieved quite a bit in terms of legislation. We actually have very good legislation to deal with the issues of transition and transformation to a majoritarian society on the tip of the African continent. We have a decent judiciary. We have certain institutions that continue to do us proud. We have changed the lot of some of our people, but sadly, we have increased the Gini coefficient. We've increased the gap between rich and poor, and there is no indication that this will change. We have become a parody of the promise of democracy because all around us, and sickeningly, daily, we get all sorts of malfeasance, corruption, and in a time when everything is instantly knowable, you would think that the people who were officials in our country would have the sense to think again about doing some of the things to enrich themselves. We have a system that seems to be breaking down rapidly. Infrastructure has deteriorated alarmingly. So all the gains that we have had simply get washed away by the terrible incompetency and self-serving nature of those who have been put into positions of power and officialdom in our country. And I think the examples for young people who make up the vast majority of our population is terrible. They are believing that this is normalcy when it is an absolute aberration of what should happen in the 21st century, in the third decade of that 21st century, when we should be braiding our gains, but instead we are consumed by all the corruption, all the ineptness around us. And also, we have become fatigued by hearing of these kinds of incidents.
Indeed.
And law and order simply is not working. We simply are failing to bring to book people on high who are responsible for this terrible state of affairs.
Is it just pure poor political leadership that is passing on this huge burden to the future generation, or is there something else? I mean, some other fundamental questions, for example, have been asked around the power and the ownership of this system.
Well, Thabo, you guys in your newsrooms, and thankfully we have such an alert media, have pointed out over the last few days that there are over 200 political parties registered to contest the local government elections. So it's almost as if for a significant group of people out there, they think the political kingdom is the route to wealth and privilege. And they've forgotten the other important P, and that's the people, in whose name they're going to abuse us from now for the next few months, as they do sickeningly every 2 or so years. That, plus, I think, the lack of vision, the sheer lack of vision from most political leadership in this country is so obvious. Last week we had, after the Q&A session in Parliament, we had a Q&A with the media by our president. And he actually ducked some of the important questions that media put to him on those issues. And it says that we don't have the will, the ability to deal with wrongdoing. We still make excuses for that. And the big picture issues, the land question, ownership, the issue of economic stability underpinned by the huge resources we have in this country, which are held in so few hands. That is something that you just pointed out. We seem to have passed it on to the next generation. And unfortunately, that next generation is very young. They're the eligible voters. And they're going to show us how they are totally fed up with the system by not registering to vote and probably not voting at all. So the majority are unemployed, are sullen out there looking for something to do. It's a ticking bomb. We should be very, very afraid that 70-something% of young people are unemployed and out of school. Yeah. And nowhere else will we sustain a system like this. So we ought to be afraid. And yet, up north, we hear from places like Morocco and Algeria that there's ferment, youth ferment. We think that this is beyond what we should be experiencing. Yet, 45 years ago, exactly on this day, students, early teens, mid-teens, got together in Donaldson, Orlando Community Center Hall in Soweto and elected an action committee to plan the events of June 16, which indelibly changed the face of this country. But yet, youth are only viewed in the negative all around us. They've been our conscience, and thank heaven, they continue to be our conscience. Now's the time to rekindle that spirit of leadership, grappling the reins of leadership by young people, so that they can save the rest of us from this calamity that we're sliding towards.
So young people say, well, every year we do commemorate this spirit, we do celebrate the bravery and the sacrifice of the June 16 group. Yet the few corrupt still continue to benefit at the expense of us, the more who are living, or the rest who are living in poverty. What did we get wrong? Did we not see this coming? Are we surprised by that even during a pandemic, that people would still steal?
No, I think we saw the signs for a long time, long before the Zuma years. It's gone on for too long. Right now, I mean, our connectivity is shaky because of electricity. There simply isn't the will and the ability to turn what was fantastic at the turn of the century, ESCOM, into the powerhouse it ought to be. And yet, I mean, this very president was the head of the war room before. So, you know, it's one group into another. They seem to be looking for themselves rather than for the country. Name me a handful, just on one hand, the leaders in political power now that we can trust. I think that for the majority of people out there, this is shameful. And that's why when somebody is charged, people turn out in numbers to support that person in the hope that there'll be some little trickle down to them. That's the state in which we have become right now. And it is a sorry one. If you talk load shedding and all that kind of stuff now, we're probably in stage 1 of level 2 of being failed. And we need to wake up and quickly. So the agency, young people, actually have that ability. There's nothing stopping young people to come together as young people and avoid the cajoling of these political parties. Very few of the political parties currently out there are redeemable because many of them and leadership are being charged, investigated, or there's some scandal associated with them. So I think we need a crop of young people like the Sibongile Mthembus, the Murphy Morobes, the Seth Mazibukos, the Baby Chawas, the Thabo Ndabenis, who led Soweto in 1976. We need people of that caliber, humble, not just boasting about doing something, but actually getting down to do something. And that surely does exist amongst our youth. The advantage is there's more of us who are more educated, and hopefully we will connect the dots and join together, not merely in small local issues, but at a national level. This is national survival, and we require our future, our children, to be well equipped to meet the challenges that go with ending this pandemic.
Dr. Saths Cooper, appreciate your time and thank you very much for joining us. Former political prisoner and president of the Pan-African Psychology Union, Dr. Saths Cooper there.